Welcome back to the Lakers Takes podcast. This is episode 9. I am your host, Edwin Garcia, and today we're not going to mince words. The Lakers have been bad. It's been a rough first quarter of the season. The team has played some of their worst basketball of the LeBron era, and we're going to break it down. We're going to talk about it. I'm going to share my thoughts and kind of talk about the lows, what's happening, what's going on, and what the future potentially holds for the Lakers currently. We'll recap this past week's games, look ahead at this week's games, and review the first quarter of the NBA season. Let's get into it. All right, the first game of this past week was on Tuesday. The Lakers were still on their East Coast trip. They were in New York. They played the Knicks, and they lost 106-100 against the New York Knicks. And really, it was a game that was over quickly. I believe in the first quarter, you kind of felt that, hey, it's probably not going to be the Lakers' night tonight. It's probably not gonna happen. They were down 36-20 already in the first quarter. So right away, they got into a big deficit, and they really never truly recovered from that. They had an okay third quarter. They had a good second quarter as well, but it was just that first quarter that killed them, and then the fourth quarter they just really couldn't close it out. They really couldn't stay get within striking distance. The 6-point lead there's a little bit disingenuous to kind of how far they were from winning. They never really were able to truly get back into that game after that first quarter deficit that they created. One thing that I think was also disappointing was THT's performance. I don't think he really played well. This was the beginning of the fall of THT. He had a 2-game rise, and then after that things just kind of have gone down. He hasn't really had a great game, and this was another one. He had 0 points in 29 minutes. He started. He was 0 for 8 from the field, 0 for 2, 2 rebounds, 4 assists, minus 18 on the night. Again, I'm not the biggest plus minus advocate, as I'm gonna point out what that stat being very wrong later, but 0 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 4 assists, 2 rebounds. It wasn't a good game for him, and it was unfortunately a trend of things to come for the week. Then on Thursday, the Lakers played the Pacers to finally end this 5-game road trip out east. The Lakers played the Pacers, and they won 124-116. And this was, a wild game because it was the Indiana Pacers, which shouldn't be a team that you really, get tested from. They're not necessarily a good team, but the Lakers were tested. They were tested by the Pacers. They were pushed kind of to the limit there. The game did end up going to overtime. So the Lakers were 100% pushed by them, but it was a great LeBron game. LeBron was absolutely phenomenal. He ended the night with 39 points, 6 assists, 5 rebounds, and he was utterly dominant in that fourth quarter and overtime. He was prime LeBron. Vintage LeBron is what a lot of people, the term they kind of coined, vintage LeBron. And he was vintage LeBron. He was dominant. He had the ball in his hands, hitting threes, hitting that classic fadeaway he's always hitting. And we saw the silencer, pounding the chest, pumping his hands down, kicking his knees high. We saw the silencer in the LeBron jersey, and when you saw that, it happened in overtime. He hit a 3, and then he did the silencer. The game still had a couple minutes left, but everyone in the stadium knew, hey, that means it's over. And of course, it was over. Lakers took, I believe, a 5-point lead at that moment, and then when they got the ball back, again, he took another mid-range fadeaway. He hit that as well. Closed out the game. Without LeBron's incredible performance, the Lakers lose to the Pacers. And as sad as that is, and as troubling as that is, it is also impressive and a good sign for Lakers Nation that LeBron is still that dude, still that guy, and not even just once in a while, but consistently and constantly. 39-piece against the Pacers. It was an incredible performance from him. And Russell Westbrook were the only ones who really had good performances from the starting 5. This was an absolutely terrible game for the starting 5. DeAndre Jordan, 4 points, 11 rebounds, but again, 4 points. He shot terribly. He wasn't very productive offensively. He wasn't very strong defensively either. THT again started 29 minutes, 8 points, didn't really do much. Avery Bradley with 0 points. He wasn't. He's there mainly for his defense, and he wasn't, defensively strong. He only shot 1 3-pointer. He missed it. Only LeBron and Russ really stepped up from the starting lineup. And you might wonder, hey, I haven't heard the word Anthony Davis yet. And that's because Anthony Davis did not play because he was sick from the flu. He was battling the flu, for several games. He barely played a couple of nights before that. And then he, mustered up the strength to play against the Knicks. and finally this fever, this flu got the best of him. He was unable to play against the Indiana Pacers. He's unable, according to the reports, to leave his hotel with the fever he had. So he really had to stay home, which, that was unfortunate. And again, the Lakers playing without, the big three, trying to get the big three to get chemistry and work together, unable to do that against the Pacers because they were not all present. But hey, they were able to get the win thanks to LeBron just playing out of his mind. All right, the next game we have was on Friday night, and this one was just cruel. It was Lakers-Kings on a Friday night, back at Staples, back home from the East Coast trip, back out west, the West Coast, the best coast, and oh my goodness, this was a painful game. It went to triple overtime, and the reason why I say it was painful was because, well, one, from the Lakers' perspective, this is not a team you should be going to triple overtime with. It shouldn't be an ESPN Classic, and two, it wasn't an ESPN Classic. It was a lot of bad basketball from both teams. It felt like, someone will win because someone has to win. But no one really, had a good game. No team can really feel, too impressed with the victory or the defeat. It was a very ugly game. And to add insult to injury, the Lakers lost this game. They lost this game triple overtime against the 8-12 Sacramento Kings. Again, it was another bad game for DeAndre Jordan. Another bad game for Avery Bradley. THT is kind of falling down now. He didn't start. He only played 24 minutes. Wasn't very productive. Only 7 points. It was just a rough game. And I think that this was definitely the situation where a lot of Lakers Nation has been clamoring and talking about how bad the starting lineup is, how bad the rotations are, how much they don't like seeing DeAndre Jordan, how much they don't like seeing, Dwight Howard sitting for so long, how they don't like seeing Avery Bradley starting, and all these things have kind of, on this night after this loss, kind of came to a head. You saw a lot of conversation, especially on Twitter, on, hey, like, Vogel out, you got to switch things up, you got to change things, this team's not working, you can't go to triple overtime against the Kings, and you definitely can't lose that game against the Kings. It's unacceptable, and there's no reason to think realistically that there's going to be championship aspirations from a team that can't close out on the Sacramento Kings. And I think at this point, there isn't even smoke or fire on Frank Vogel. It's all fire. There's definitely, it's getting to the point where it's becoming more and more realistic that, he's in trouble. He needs to figure this out, and not only just win games. It's not just about winning. It's about how you play, and how this team has played is poor. I don't think, looking back at this week's games, and we still have one more to do, which is the Pistons-Lakers game, I can't think of one game where they played well, regardless of the outcome. They were all ugly for different reasons and bad for different reasons. And I think at this point, that's something that needs to be talked about. And we're going to talk about it more. It's part of what's going on with this team this season. It's a lot of bad basketball. It's a lot of just being good enough against the poor teams and really not being focused on defense. When you have a defensive coach, and you have a defensive coach who's unable to kind of optimize the offense, so you're getting the worst of both worlds instead of the best of any of them. And at this point, I think it's fair to say he's in the hot seat, and it's fair to say that, if I had to bet one way or another, I'd bet he doesn't finish the season, then I bet he does. And that's, in some ways unfortunate, but also reality. And the final game of the week just happened on Sunday night. It was Lakers-Pistons. The Lakers won 110-106. LeBron James again with another great performance. He had 33 points, 9 assists, and 5 rebounds, 37 minutes of play. Only player who played more minutes than LeBron James was Anthony Davis with 38 minutes. He had 24 points. And Russell Westbrook, a person I haven't mentioned much so far in this podcast, he had 25 points and 9 assists, 6 rebounds, and only 3 turnovers, and that's the key. Only 3 turnovers, and he's improved. One thing about him, I should have mentioned him earlier, but he had a pretty good week. He was productive, he was impactful, he was more of a positive than a negative, and he didn't make any horrible mistakes in any of the fourth quarters or late in games to cost the team any games. Any game they lost, it's because they deserved to lose from the beginning, and any games they won, he was a positive aspect of that victory. So you got to give credit to Russell Westbrook for stepping up, improving. He's warming up. I mentioned it on Twitter that, the Russ stands told me that he starts slow and ramps up to not worry. That's how he is. And sure enough, he's already starting to do that, where he's looking better. He's looking better, and he's starting to warm up. He's starting to ramp up, and that's happening already. So I'm happy about that. That's one of the positives in a season that's been filled with negatives. That's one of the positives. Russell Westbrook starting to heat up. It's starting to make sense, and the fit so far has worked. The big three, all big three played well. 24 points for AD, 33 points for LeBron, 25 for Westbrook, which is why beating the Pistons by 4 points is troubling. Still barely being able to scratch out a win when your big three play well. That means two things are happening. One, either the supporting cast is poor, or two, you're not utilizing the supporting cast in the best ways possible. And I think when you look at a game where DeAndre Jordan started and played 21 minutes, Avery Bradley started and played 18 minutes, Dwight Howard got a DNP, coach's decision, Wayne Ellington only played 15 minutes, I have questions. I don't think I like the answers, and the person in charge is Frank Vogel on that. So he'll have to answer those questions. When they win, there's definitely a lot less noise about his job security and his role, but there's still even then noise because the roster decisions just honestly don't make sense based on what we've seen, based on what we know, and based on just the eye test of how this team's performing. It doesn't feel like this is optimizing the lineup, optimizing the roster that you have presented. And winning does solve everything, and it does hide things, but I don't know how much more you can hide from that with how the team's playing, both in wins and losses. And you have hard games coming up this week, which we'll get into in a little bit. It's only going to get, I think, exposed more against teams that are even better. No disrespect to the Kings, and Pacers, Knicks, but in Pistons, but these aren't the best teams in the world. The Knicks are probably the only team that'll make the playoffs. These are subpar teams you should be easily beating. And you ended up 2-2, and you barely scratched out wins in the games that you did win. All right, so there you go. The Lakers are currently 11-11. They've played 22 games, which means they've gone past the first quarter mark. That's right. We're already one quarter done with the season. So if you take the 82 divided by 4, it's 21.5. They're at 22, so they've officially crossed over. So I thought this is the perfect time to have a first quarter review, to break down the team and talk about what they've done and who deserves what awards for the first quarter. So I did this last year before I had a podcast, so I've never done it on the pod. I'm about to do it right now. But basically, I think people look at the end of the year award kind of in a wacky way. They look at it at the end. They look at it sometimes way too early in the beginning. I've been seeing MVP race, votes already. And I'm like, it hasn't even been a quarter of the year. I think you should at least wait. So I decided that we should just look at this periodically at the quarter mark, kind of like you do at school, where here's your quarter grade, let's take a look at it. So doing that, I've decided to give out my end of the year awards now. And we're going to do this at the end of every quarter, at the halfway point, the three-quarters point, and the end of the season, not the end of the regular season, the end of whenever this Lakers season ends. That's when I'll do the final one, because I wanted to take into account everything, including the playoffs. Ridiculous not to take account the reason you play the games. So I do that, and I'm going to also review that, and that context is going to be part of my decision on who the MVP, Defensive Player of the Year is. So I'm going to give out those awards now, and it'll be interesting to see how this changes and develops as the year goes on. So let's get into it. My MVP for the Los Angeles Lakers is LeBron James. So I think this one's pretty easy. I think even in year 19, even with only playing in 11 games of the possible 22, so half of the games, it's been clear LeBron is the best player on the Lakers, and his numbers speak for themselves. 25.1 points, 5.2 rebounds, 6.6 assists per game, and his impact cannot be questioned. When he plays, the Lakers are 7-4. When he doesn't play, the Lakers are 4-7. That's impact. That's the difference. That's value. He's the best player. He's the most valuable player. Year 19, LeBron James, still your MVP. Now, for my Defensive Player of the Year award, so far, after one quarter of the season being done, I'm going with Anthony Davis. Again, his rim protection, his ability to guard players 1 through 5, his speed against guards and his strength against bigs, I think is unmatched. There really aren't, any players that can really do that, in the NBA. That's extremely, extremely rare. He's leading the team in defensive rebounds with 7.3. He's leading the team in blocks with 2.3, and he's averaging a respectable 1.3 steals per game. He's one of the best defenders in the NBA, and he's the best defender on the Lakers. Now, most improved was tricky for me. How do you assess most improved on a team of veterans that are no longer improving, right? Like Melo's best years are past them. LeBron's best years are past them. So who can really take a jump and improve? There aren't that many players, in my opinion, according to how the definition of most improved is, of those words. But there are a few. And when I look at the team, honestly, I have to say that right now there isn't a most improved player. I think players that are eligible for that kind of award would be THT if he takes a jump, Kendrick Nunn, Malik Monk if he optimizes himself in his role. Maybe even Bazemore, who's a bit more of a veteran, but still very young. Those are the kind of players that I think could be most improved. But right now, the way they've played and performed, I have to say they haven't improved enough for me to give them that award. So I'm going to abstain from this award. I'm not giving this award to anybody. There is no most improved right now. There's going to have to be some players that step up to earn that right now. And I hope that they do. I hope THT has a good year. I hope THT improves. I hope when Kendrick Nunn comes, he shows how impactful he is. And I hope that Malik Monk continues to play well and we could get more good Monk games versus bad Monk games. And he can ultimately, be a candidate for this award. But right now, I'm just not going to give it to anybody. All right. And for the Sixth Man of the Year award, I am going to give it to someone this time, and I'm going to give it to Carmelo Anthony. Amazing that Carmelo Anthony went from laughing about coming off the bench to being the best player to come off the bench. He's been incredible. He's been amazing. Lakers Nation loves Carmelo Anthony, and rightfully so. Staples Melo is a thing. It's special seeing him play for the Lakers. As soon as he gets subbed in, the crowd erupts, the crowd bursts. It's just love and cheers and joy, and he has been amazing coming off the bench. He's averaging 15 points, 3.8 rebounds in 29.5 minutes per game. The fact he's even playing 29 minutes is impressive. It probably shouldn't be happening as well because he should be a bench player, role player, but he's had to step up with other players out and fill in, where he can fit in the forward position, and he's been amazing. He's been great. He single-handedly won a couple games. He's had games where he shot 7 for 10 from 3. He's been phenomenal. All you could have asked for, all you could have hoped for, and more. Definitely one of the best pickups the Lakers had in the offseason, and one of the top performers, and I think not only is he sixth man for the Lakers, he should be in the conversation for sixth man of the league. All right, so there are all the awards. Before we wrap up the first quarter awards segment, I do want to give a highlight to peak performers. Now, this is just a category about who is leading the team in points, rebounds, and assists. So you're not going to get too much, a conversation from me. We're just going to read it off, and these are just the stats. These are just the facts, and then we can move forward. Just want to highlight these players. So the Lakers' peak performer in the points category is LeBron James, averaging 25.1 points per game. The Lakers' peak performer in the rebounding category is Anthony Davis, averaging 10.2 rebounds per game. And the Lakers' peak performer in the assist category is Russell Westbrook, averaging 8.7 assists per game. So there you have it. There's your MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Most Improved is abstained, sixth man, and your peak performers, LeBron in points, AD in rebounds, Russell Westbrook in assists. The Lakers are 11-11. Let's hope when we look at the halfway point, the team is well above 500, and we'll see how these awards change over time. All right, we have a short week for the Lakers this week. There isn't that much basketball. They only have 2 games. They have a game versus the Kings on Tuesday, which is going to be in Sacramento, and then they have a game against the Clippers, LA versus LA, in Staples Center, but it will be technically the Clippers home game. So that's what's happening on Friday, and that's it. Only 2 games. We've had weeks where they have 3, 4, 5 games. This week, only 2 games. I think it's good. This team's been playing every other day for, I think, 2 or 3 weeks now. It's been very intense. Only like 2 teams have played as many games as the Lakers have. So now they'll get some rest this week. Some other teams will catch up to where they are in terms of games played. And they'll get some rest here, which is good. They need to get healthy. They're just about there, only missing a couple guys. So hopefully this helps get everyone back up to speed, get everyone rested, and get those other guys up. Let's see when Kendrick Nunn and Ariza can come back. They're still reportedly a ways away, but obviously we're all optimistic and hopeful that they return soon. All right, that's it. That's going to do it for this edition of the Lakers Takes podcast. I'm really excited about the second quarter of the season. Hopefully, it's more positive than the first. We'll see what happens. We'll see how much THT develops. We'll see if Frank Vogel stays as the head coach of the Lakers. We'll see if the Lakers can rise above the 500 mark. At the time of this recording, they're in 6th place. They're the 6th seed. That's pretty good given all the ups and downs they've had this season. Let's see if they can get some more wins and start to rise up in the standings. I'll talk to you next week for the 10th episode of the Lakers Takes podcast.